this riot spread across the blocks and took place for hours, and there were arrests. There are no police records. There are no mugshots or names of people involved in this. And the city really obviously wanted to try and erase what had happened at that night. But this was the very first well-documented, collective uprisings of trans and queer folks against police violence and harassment. And so that really put us on the map, especially as it predated Stonewall riots by 3 years.
What's next for a neighborhood under siege? We'll have to wait and see. Reporting live, Sadie Sinclair, Channel 7 News.
Castro gets all the glory, but the Tenderloin is where so much of San Francisco's trans and queer action was happening for many years, still is to an extent, although a lot of the old spots are no longer with us. One of those spots was a late night diner called Compton's Cafeteria, which wasn't owned by anyone trans or queer, but it was definitely trans and queer territory. And it is where one of the earliest actions that we know of against state and police repression of trans and queer people happened back in 1966. Today, in 2025, the space is operated by the private prison and ICE detention center corporation Geo Group. I've gotten to have Susan Stryker on the podcast, the historian who has become a friend since she was on to talk about Compton's on one of the first episodes of this podcast. And Susan is one of the major reasons why we have this history, which you can learn about in the documentary that she co-directed, Screaming Queens. You can read about it in the Transgender Reader that she also edited. But today I'm going to speak with Zai. Zai is part of Turk Taylor Initiative, which has been trying to shut down what is effectively a jail in the middle of the city. And if you're in the city on November 6th, please think about coming out with some of us. We're going to City Hall to help make the liberation of what was formerly Compton's Cafeteria happen. There will be info in the show notes about that. Friendly reminder that you can go to patreon.com/SadFrancisco to help and support this show. That money helps me pay the editor of this show, Tyger. It helps me pay my rent to a certain extent. And I remain forever grateful to everyone who is donating there. So, Zai, thank you for joining us here in the virtual studio. And first, before we get started, just wanted to ask, how you linked up with Compton's.
Yeah, so it was on Trans Day of Visibility last year. I attended an event hosted by Turk and Taylor Initiative at Counterpulse, where a group of, architects and academia folks came together to present some of their designs for visioning a new future for 111 Taylor Street, the site of Compton's Cafeteria riot. And I was really awestruck by the idea of liberating a site from the world's largest private prison, corporation.
Yeah.
And I reached out on their website and let them know I'm a community organizer who really wants to get involved and help this project out. And shortly thereafter, I was able to join the legislative research team, where I found the contracts that Geo Group has with the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation and the Federal Bureau of Prisons. And from there, I developed a kind of a strategic plan, multi-pronged approach on how we could actually get this huge private prison company out of our site. And so I kind of pitched the plan to Turk and Taylor Initiative, and it got unanimous support. It was a very lofty 3-month turnaround, kind of geared toward pressuring, applying pressure to get Geo Group out around their California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation contract expiration date. So we had, you know, proposed the plan. It got unanimous support from everyone within Turk and Taylor Initiative, and I said, "Well, that's great. I'm not able to, I'm not able to see this out because I am looking for work right now, and I'm unfortunately going to have to, you know, continue to job hunt." And I was invited in to receive a small stipend to begin organizing to put this plan to life. And so that's what I've been committed to, going on now. God, goodness, just under a year. A lot has happened, and I'm really, really grateful, that I'm able to be sustained in this work. Uh, Something that I'm really passionate about. I've been organizing for, over 15 years, um, but organizing for the trans community at a time like this has been really fulfilling in so many ways. Whereas my prior employment has been, taken me out of community as part of like the big nonprofit industrial complex, you know, as I was organizing for a large uh, environmental nonprofit organization. So being able to dive right back into this community and body of work has been a total dream come true. I can't imagine a better place, a more important place to be in than dedicating my time and energy to this fight.
Yeah, and the fight is around a specific site in the Tenderloin, a few blocks from where I'm at currently. And for many years, I was totally unaware that what we have here in the Tenderloin is, I mean, adjacent to a private prison, operated by, like you mentioned, this contractor Geo Group, one of the biggest private imprisonment corporations in the US and the world. Um, for people that don't know and haven't listened to a previous episode that we did with Susan Stryker about Compton's, can you talk about its significance and what happened there in 1966?
Yeah, absolutely. So to give you a little context, I think people need to understand what happened. What San Francisco was like in the 50s and 60s in the Tenderloin. The Tenderloin was home to over 500 trans women who lived in the Queens hotels in the surrounding area near the crossroads of Turk and Taylor. There were a number of queer trans bars and hotspots that it was essentially the red light district for queer and trans sex workers. A lot of street youth would, frequent the area, and so in the culture of the Tenderloin back in the '60s was it was the only real safe haven for trans folks to exist. There was heavy policing nonetheless, and really persistent violence against the trans community, and eventually one day, everything changed. People had had enough. This story goes that on a hot August night in 1966 at Compton's Cafeteria, um, you know, just to give a little context there also, Compton's Cafeteria was a 24-hour diner where trans folks were able to sit and mingle and, show off a new dress or bring their new boyfriend around, kick off their heels, have a cup of coffee. The coffee was super cheap. Folks would, sit all night and come together after a long night working the streets, perhaps just to check in with each other, let each other know that they survived through the night. And it was frequent, the harassment that these folks would experience at the hands of the San Francisco Police Department, where almost every other night they would enter Compton's Cafeteria and harass or intimidate or make fun of or try to provoke reactions from trans folks for things as simple as wearing buttons on the wrong side of their shirt, or that which was illegal, and this was called like female impersonation was kind of the law that they were claiming to be enforced.
Right, because button ups are like gendered,
Right,
based on which side the button is sewn into.
that's right.
Yeah. Little details like that. They were looking for. They were spending the resources and the time of the vice squads of the police department on. Yeah, no, I wish we had this kind of place today. Like 24-hour hangout spots are few and far between, especially ones that are open to people who are not your cis heteronormative types. Um, and so yeah, I what happened this particular night in August 1966?
Obviously the cops were and still are like bullies with a complete disdain for the trans community. And on a hot August night in 1966, two police officers entered Compton's. They spotted a woman from across the room who had likely been in an argument with them the night before, and they approached her. One of the cops grabbed her by the arm, and she had enough. She chucked her hot cup of coffee straight into his face. And so the first cop who'd just been hit with coffee kind of fell back in pain, right? And the whole cafe froze for a minute. Someone picked up a one of those heavy glass sugar shakers and clocked the second cop square in his head. And in that moment, the community kind of really came together and decided they're going to join in, right? And so before too long, these cops were being pushed out of the doors of the Compton's cafeteria. Tables were being flipped, windows were being smashed in, and for the first time, the community seemed to be fighting back and not running, but actually following the cops as they were running out the doors with their tail between their legs. This was actually, surprisingly enough, kind of a planned, it seemed as though it was a planned raid that night because backup was already on its way. They didn't radio in for backup. It was as if the woman they were trying to initially arrest, it was essentially going to be a part of a larger raid. So before too long, the streets filled up with street kids and hustlers and queens who were out there fighting the cops. It was an all-out brawl at the crossroads of Turk and Taylor, right in front of Compton's Cafeteria. And there, as you know, there were a lot of the hotels in the surrounding area were homes to a lot of the trans women, and there were a lot of bars like Chuckers, that was a trans Latina owned nightclub down the road, emptied out to the streets, along with like the bar adjacent to Compton's was a common hotspot for queens to turn tricks. Before too long, the streets were filled with folks fighting the cops. There was a newsstand that was right in front of the cafeteria where folks broke into the newsstand, wadded up newspapers, lit them on fire, and were throwing them at the cops. And eventually, that newsstand burned to the ground. And one of the cop cars parked in front of Compton's was completely smashed to smithereens by this crowd. So, this riot spread across the blocks and took place for hours, and there were arrests. There are no police records. There are no mug shots or names of people involved in this. And the city really obviously wanted to try and erase what had happened at that night. But this was the very first well-documented, collective uprisings of trans and queer folks against police violence and harassment. And so that really put us on the map, especially as it predated Stonewall riots by 3 years.
Right. Right. It would have been extremely embarrassing, I think, for the police to have records of of these moments. Who knows? It could have set, more of a precedent for this kind of thing to be happening even more regularly. And this is all happening in the late 60s, when, a lot of different civil rights movements were very active. So it makes sense that they would want to kind of like brush this under the rug. And as far as, yeah, like this was a recorded event. The community, knew about it. It was reported in a bunch of the community papers. A lot of mainstream media, it seemed like, were, trying to brush it under the rug a bit. But this history remains, and it remains like to be a symbol of, people who have been traditionally pushed out of cities. This was a moment when people stood up and absolutely, was one of the first instances that we have recorded of this kind of thing happening. Cooper's Donuts in LA had happened, I think, the previous year. Another early case where people who were, trans and queer stood up against the police. And so, ironically, in this very twisted way, what exists today at this site that really symbolized, revolutionary possibility?
Yeah, so about 30 years ago, the site was purchased by a private prison company, and in 1999 changed hands to the corporation that is in charge today, which is Geo Group. Geo Group is the world's largest private prison corporation and the top ICE contractor. And to know that this facility is a quasi re-entry facility. Its purpose is to basically house folks who are on parole, leaving federal prisons and state jails. Um, the folks who are held at 111 Taylor, the federal parolees have to pay a large portion of their income in order to live there, and the state folks have to save 75% of their income in order to stay there. Folks there
Yeah,
are forced into labor. So Geo Group, let me give you a picture. Geo Group is not just the world's largest private prison corporation and top ICE contractor, but this is the corporation that is in charge of they've essentially monopolized deportation flights and carceral transportation, electronic surveillance and monitoring, like folks who are on house arrest or who have to report to ISAP offices, which is kind of an electronic monitoring immigration program. But they also get multi-billion-dollar contracts from the federal government to reopen shuttered prison sites to turn them into ICE detention
yeah.
facilities.
That's what we saw. Yeah, just basically a month ago at California City. Um, that previously shut down, or rather, it was on. There's like a term for it. It was basically no longer being used as a prison, but it was still being sort of maintained, which in itself, sucks tons of resources. Uh, Being maintained in case the state or some other, organization wanted to reopen this prison, and unfortunately, it has been reopened as an ICE detention center. So, yeah, I mean, it's really, it was jarring when I found out that this existed blocks away from where I live. And I ended up working with a couple of people when I was over at Transgender Gender Variant Intersex Justice Project, the group that Janetta Johnson currently stewards. And of course, we know Miss Major. was a big part of. And so now it it remains. And we talked a little bit about some of the reasons why people should loathe Geo Group, including that it is profiting off of people being confined in spaces like this, in full on prisons, and spaces like this that are sort of these like purgatory spaces that you stay in as you're um, you know uh, being sort of integrated back into society. But it's really, there's so many ways that it mirrors the experience of a of lockdown, because the curfews, the inability to have guests. It's really, there are so many different ways that it's a carceral space, including that it is run by this giant uh, corporation making money off of people being confined. Um, so last summer, the CDCR, the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, decided to extend Geo Group's contract. Um, like, in terms of people in power that we need to target to hasten Geo Group's exit from the middle of the city, who are you looking at going after?
Yeah, we should have our eyes on a lot of local and state and federal legislators and governing bodies. I think that our coalition is pursuing a multi-pronged strategy to target each agency that we possibly can in order to liberate the site. We're looking at pressuring Bilal Mahmoud and the board of supervisors of the city of San Francisco um, to pass ordinances that can block or ban Geo Group's operations at 111 Taylor and through the city. Um, we are, we are also pursuing litigation in terms of filing a wrongful death lawsuit for the loss of Melvin Bulawin, who passed away while in Geo Group's custody this July. We're working to advance our historic landmark designation to encompass the entire building. We need to be pressuring Senator Scott Wiener to host a budget oversight hearing as he vice chairs the California Budget Oversight Committee, which has the power to audit CDCR and Geo Group and impact the contracts. So we need to shrink and starve Geo Group, cutting ties, cutting their contracts with the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation and the Federal Bureau of Prisons. So that will also include targeting, Nancy Pelosi and the Attorney General Rob Bonta. But if I had to paint like one decision maker as a target, I really think that the city attorney of San Francisco has been pretty instrumental in slowing down our processes around the Board of Appeals hearing series that we just got out of, in addition to this upcoming hearing that we have at the Government Audit and Oversight Committee on November 6th.
Cool. Yeah, thanks. We will keep our eyes on David Chu, who is the city attorney currently. The process of reimagining and revisioning of the future of this site has been a big part. Like, one of the I guess more positive parts of this work. We're dealing with a lot of sort of negative forces, but one of the things that I've found, source of optimism, is how people are thinking through uh, what this space, currently a private prison, what the space could actually be. So what does that process look like in trying to revision what it could be?
That process of imagining what could become of this space has been, yeah, as you say, kind of a really great source of joy and creativity for the community. This process is not prescriptive, right? So we, as a coalition, are committed to making sure that we are listening to the voices of the people most impacted by carceral violence and otherwise, right? The original stewards of the land, the Ramatish Ohlone folks. We are working toward essentially collecting ideas and visions from a broad range of tenderloin neighbors, trans folks, people who have been incarcerated at 111 Taylor, indigenous communities, and beyond, people who have been displaced by gentrification from the tenderloin, historians, researchers, scholars, and alike, the children of the tenderloin, right? So everyone's voice is helping to shape the vision of what this place becomes. And I would say there's like some common threads and themes that we've noticed, right? I think uh, what our community essentially has dreamed up and seemed committed to throughout the process is a commitment to the most expansive vision of justice that we can collectively imagine, beyond just the trans identity, and recognizing that the Compton's Cafeteria riots was a very pivotal moment for the trans community, but beyond that, in honoring the original stewards of the land, the Ramatish Ohlone folks. And so the commitment is essentially, in envisioning the broadest vision of justice possible, is to make sure that we are basing everything on a land back kind of process where the community land trust that we have started is designed in a way where the site could be given back to the original people of the land, and to allow the original stewards to make what they need to of the space. And there are also other common desires that we've seen through our surveying and art builds and envisioning sessions and conversations and cultural festivals that we've held. And there's common themes around a desire for affordable housing, and a to kind of like have another 24-hour perhaps kind of cafe space where trans folks are able to come, anyone from the neighborhood is able to come and not be turned away, to kind of have another Comptons of sorts, just this time without the police violence.
Yeah, no, some of these like really basic needs, places for people to congregate. I mean, you mentioned Counterpulse. There's a few of these spaces left, like the third spaces, but they're fewer and far between these days. And yeah, I mean, having more space that's dedicated to movements, organizing, that is open and available for free, that doesn't charge by the hour, would be huge. And of course, housing, another like huge, the biggest cost that most of us incur in our lives. And um, one that, yeah, I mean, the Tenderloin was also like where this universal basic income for trans people was piloted. And unfortunately, that was kind of swept under the rug. The program canceled last year. But yeah, I mean, I think some of like addressing these basic needs, addressing like land back.
Yep.
I mean, these are the things that I appreciate that Compton's has been like centering. Um, uh, what would you say, from your perspective, are some of the kind of creative, weird ideas to come out of this process of gathering community input for what the space could be?
That's a great question. Part of our strategy is a just transition pillar, which essentially ensures that we are we are listening to the people who have been subjected to systems of carceral violence, the people who have lived through, you know, their time at 111 Taylor, and allow those folks to really shape and transform, kind of shape the vision and the future. Um, of what happens at the site. And so, one of the most creative ideas there. I mean, it's hard to say, right? We have probably over 100 different submissions of people's dreams of what becomes of the space,
Yeah.
and a lot of them vary greatly. Um, one of the coolest creative ideas that we've observed coming from this visioning process is to have a kind of a VR virtual reality like history walking tour where you can like put on some glasses perhaps and relive the riot,
Hmm.
kind of doing an immersive experience and historical like tour. You could walk around the neighborhood and see what it was like back in the 50s and 60s, where the streets were lined with queer and trans owned spaces, and vibrant and alive with folks on the sidewalk who it was more of a trans district then than it is now, in my opinion. But yeah, one of
Yeah.
the yeah,
Some of the cool, yeah, like things that have come out of like since Compton's started organizing, there's been a couple of uh, art artists that have come out and created like drag shows, plays about Compton's, about that night at Compton's. There was recently a group of dancers who did some like aerial interpretations of, I believe, what happened that night. And yeah, just thinking about like cool different ways to re-envision um, at like what happened at that point in time that until like a couple of decades back, and a lot of the work that Susan did in um, spotlighting what had happened in 1966, it was pretty much buried.
it was so buried. Yeah, Dr. Susan Stryker stumbled across the snippet, the mention of Compton's Cafeteria, right, about 30 years ago, and created the film Screaming Queens, which I highly recommend anyone stream for free. You can find it on YouTube. And she also published a beautiful paper, quite a long, lengthy, and very descriptive piece called "At the Crossroads of Turk and Taylor."
Mhm.
Um, that really allowed me to fully understand kind of the roots, and the legacy that I'm hoping to help carry forward. Um, but
Yeah.
yeah, the arts and culture aspect, there have been so many beautiful forms of creative resistance and reimagining that have been happening in our community, not just the flyaway productions, performance down on the corner where we had aerial dancers rappelling from the Warfield Hotel and doing a rendition of what had happened that night, and having a light projection show featuring uh, things from Compton's Cafeteria Riot. But we've also had the immersive Compton's Cafeteria Riot play, running shows each weekend for many months now. Um, we've we've also dreamed up having a rooftop garden, creating a site of healing for the space, honoring it's always been a site of resistance.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
and a lot of these ways, yeah, bringing things off of the internet. Of course, people are listening to this podcast through the internet. But some of these ways to get the history out in creative ways that are free of some of the censorship that we know is happening on, like Twitter. You can't use the word cisgender because Elon Musk says that it's a slur now. So, any of these platforms that we're on, you're not going to get the whole story. And that means we are necessarily going to have to log off. And these like kind of arts and culture ways of getting word out, I think are a really uh, uh, cool thing that we can expect more of in the future as the internet kind of narrows its the ability to, like, even find things on Google. It's really hard with all of the AI slop out there at the moment. Um, you recently spoke at the vigil for Melvin, who you mentioned earlier, who recently passed at 111 Taylor. Um, you know, I thought it might be a good time for you to brief people on what happened there, and then we could discuss how this place that was meant to care for people, including Melvin, we can't depend on it. We can't depend on the prison industrial complex to really care for people. Rehabilitation might be in the name of California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, but it's really not the actual mission. The mission is to keep people confined.
That's right. Yeah. So on July 14th, just 2 days before our Board of Appeals hearing, uh, a father, an immigrant, a man, a community member, a longtime resident of the neighborhood, Melvin Bulawin, passed away while in Geo Group's custody. He was found after, he was found just down the block, but essentially Melvin had called his son Andrew on the phone to let him know that he had just arrived at the facility, and that he did not want to be there. He said, "I'd rather go back to jail than to be here. I don't feel
Mm.
safe, and there's no way I can sleep here. I need help right now. This is an emergency." So Andrew, Melvin's son, called Geo Group 3 times and was hung up on. Later, they found Melvin had passed away just a block down the road. This kind of like wrongful death in the custody of the world's largest private prison corporation is a story that has catalyzed a hearing that's been called for by the Board of Supervisors. It's a really tragic loss. Melvin's youngest daughter was really looking forward to her 18th birthday because he was maybe going to be able to spend time with her, send her a note, or see her in person, and he wasn't able to make it because he lost his life. He actually passed away on his birthday too. But yeah, as you're saying, like we cannot rely on the prison industrial complex to rehabilitate anyone. The kind of wolf in sheep's clothes approach that Geo Group has, they appropriate language and use phrases such as "we're using transformative justice to,
Right.
like support people in re-entering society after their prison terms."
Yeah.
But let's be real, the the corporation is just profiting off of every single person who's held in their custody. They're not free. They don't have access to controlling their food or their comings and goings. They're forced into head counts, lockdowns, drug screenings. They are subjected to harsh retaliation and violence in the facility with like high numbers of sexual assault cases and maggots in the food, mold in their spaces, blocked egress where they're not able to leave the facility in case of emergencies. Um, we've heard a number of like really daunting reports, and I'm really grateful to Melvin Bulawin's family for having the courage to speak out against the loss of his life while in Geo Group's custody. They they sent us a letter and they let us know that they're paying attention to the Compton's coalition, work. They are really grateful for it, and they were informing us about the loss of their father's life. So this initiative that the family has taken to be outspoken about some of the human rights abuses and wrongful death that they've experienced has catalyzed a hearing at the Board of Supervisors coming up November 6th.
Yeah, let's talk about that because this episode should air before then. If people want to come out and support the project and support Melvin's family as they try to seek, whatever justice that they can, how can people, show up?
Yeah, absolutely. So on November 6th at 10 a.m. at the Government Audit and Oversight Committee, there will be a hearing to analyze the allegations of human rights abuses and neglect and mistreatment that takes place at that facility. It's a crucial battleground for the trans community and beyond. This hearing can result in some real tangible actions, and so we are calling on everyone in the community, allies and otherwise, to turn out. Please commit to attending on November 6th at 10 a.m. and testify as to why you think that Geo Group needs to be held accountable and what you want to happen with the site of Compton's Cafeteria riot.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm planning on being out there. And like you said, as much as they are trying to co-opt language around care with these spaces, this is clearly, in Melvin's case and thousands of others, like not a place where people are going to receive the kind of care that they need as they come back into community from places like, the prisons in the second most imprisoning states in the U.S., California, second only to Texas. So yeah, thank you so much, Zai, for your work, continuing to make sure that people know about what happened at Compton's and helping make this project be like a center, like an organizing center, because a lot of people are getting into movement work for the first time through Compton's work, which is beautiful to see.
Yeah,
So
I mean, and with the recent loss of Miss Major, I I really feel like the community is ready to come together and help carry that torch. And so, thank you for having us on Sad Francisco, and for all your work and what you do. I really appreciate the time.
so stoked that we met, and we'll be there November 6th live. Come out if you can. Thank you for listening to the show, and especially thank you to everyone who is contributing over at patreon.com/Sad Francisco. You're making it possible for Sad Francisco to exist. And if you're not already a member, think about joining. Again, it's patreon.com/Sad Francisco.